Namaste. Continuing our discussion on the surreal, we will explore today the collective aspect of surreal. And to discuss that, we have with the psychoanalysis consultant, Mr. Himanshu Vai. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Sir, what is the relation between the surreal, the individual desire, pathology, and society?
Surreal is everywhere. It is also engaging with desire of a normal individual, pathology of a distressed individual, and it is also used by spirituality and society. So surreal is everywhere because it is pervasively spread out in our minds, particularly in our unconscious. With respect to individual, the surreal specifies our desire. So the desire may be to show off and score points over others, but how do we do that? By either um, wearing a good dress, or by buying a very good car and showing off, or by creating a home which is very impressive. That is different. And when we do this, fantasy and surreal plays a very key role. I should not be using the two words together, but let me say the surreal plays a very key role. And therefore, the way an individual satisfies his desires, surreal fuses itself there, pervades it. Similarly, when an individual thinks, much of his thinking, particularly the more emotional and artistic and imaginative part of his thinking, is pervaded by the surreal. So this is one aspect related to the individual, how the surreal affects the individual. That the individual things involving the surreal, he interprets events around himself, and this interpretation involves the surreal. So at the unconscious level, whatever events happen around the individual, the way the events get interpreted and evaluated, that involves the surreal. Similarly, when we look at pathology, surreal plays a twofold role. One, that part of pathology which is purely fantastical in nature, where events were imagined, they never happened. So we can talk about Oedipus, we can talk about false pregnancies, we can talk about unconscious fantasies. So these were the events. You can talk about the paranoid schizoid position and all pathologies rooted in them. So these are some of the pathologies where in many cases, in most cases actually, the real events never happened. The events were imagined. What the mind thought of the events was actually a surreal rendition of the events, not the events themselves. So the mother goes away to work or some urgent work, and the child experiences the paranoid schizoid position. Now, there is no relation, if you look at it from a normal point of view, between the real life event and what happens inside the mind. So, what happens inside the mind is a surreal rendition of the event which happens outside. So, when we talk of pathology, a large group of pathology which essentially is based on how the mind interprets things more rather than what actually happened, that group of pathology is heavily influenced by surreal. In fact, the way the surreal moves is the very cause of that pathology, apart from ego strength and other defensive structures and so on. So one of the central elements there is the surreal that moves in a dysfunctional way to contribute towards pathology. Second group of pathologies pertain to uh, certain events which are apprehended, and there again it's a surreal at work. There is a surreal fear of something apprehended. Nothing in reality actually is happening. So the whole range of phobia and apprehension events apprehension related pathologies, they are there, what we call catastrophic thinking. The second group of pathologies which is related to the surreal. And the third element is what we said, society. How society uses the surreal. Now, society uses the surreal to actually create a culture, and culture involves everything. So, let us take a few examples. For spiritual purposes, uh, society creates mythological stories in the area of spirituality, where certain spiritual truths, very deep spiritual truths, are hidden inside those mythological stories. To address psychological concerns, society creates psychological myths. For example, let us say the myth of Samudra Manthan or the churning of the ocean is a myth which is a spiritual myth, where inside the popular myth, lot of spiritual knowledge is contained. When we talk of the Ganesha myth, right, it addresses a psychological issue. When we talk of uh, the myth of Mahishasur, again a psychological issue is being addressed. Then let us say we have myths related to health practices, where it is said on certain auspicious days in particular seasons what should be eaten and not eaten. So that is in accordance with the principles of Ayurveda, where the surreal through popular myths are used to address the area of health. So society, let us say the marriage system. To preserve the marriage system, many myths are created and people are exposed to these myths very early in their lives. And this is very, very necessary to lay the foundation for training somebody to enter into the marriage system and successfully be there. You can't train a person in Air Force and then send him to navigate a submarine. If you do that, he will drive the submarine also like a fighter plane. And this is what happens, that if you want to send a person into the marriage system, you have to train him for that. If you want to send him to an individualistic free sex system, you have to train him for that. Every system will have do's and don'ts, and every system requires training. So society uses the surreal and the mythological myths and social rituals and conventions uh, involving the surreal to create this ecosystem of training people for a particular format of life. Come to the last point of celebration. How to celebrate the color and flavor of life. For that again, society evolves festivals, and the festivals are celebrated in a way which involve lot of surreal, which involves the materials of this real world. Take for example Holi, the festival of colors, and there is a mythology surrounding it. There are rituals of how to celebrate it, how to use colors, and what to do. So society uses the surreal in every area, be it health, culture, the marriage system, or any social system, the celebration, even mourning. How to do mourning, how many people should go, who should particularly go, and how to do the last rites, what should follow the last rites, the grieving period, and so on. So at every level, in every area of life, uh, culture is helpful to create an ecosystem to manage all the aspirations and desires and events of life, both naturally ordained and man-made. And in every area of that, the surreal is used by the society to design an ecosystem to facilitate life. So this way we look at the surreal, the way it functions and is used, right, at the level of individual with respect to pathology and how society uses it.
So, what if the society stops using surreal for its purpose, or maybe the society, the surreal gets discredited in the society?
Unfortunately, that is the situation in the modern times. one of the elements of modernity is discrediting of the myth. And this has meant two things. One is uh, condemnation and dismissal of mythology. And second is uh, creation of dysfunctional myths by corporates and governments and media houses. These are the two important elements of the modern times, and the result is that there is a kind of assassination of traditions and myths. And many of the, if you look at the mythological space and if you treat myths as entities, then it's almost like myth as a species is now an endangered species. And this has profound implications for human mind, human welfare, human quality of life, and human society. So, what happens when the myth is assassinated, when the surreal is assassinated, particularly the constructive deployment of surreal in the mythological structure? Because these myths have passed through refinement of generations. And when the myths so refined are assassinated in a kind of a blanket bombing by modernity, what we have is a rootless, alienated individual. And this rootless, alienated individual is not able to feel anchored, grounded, solid, and capable of facing most of the circumstances. So this is one aspect, that the kind of peace, the groundedness and the strength and the very natural organic happiness that the past generations had is missing, and now the flavor of happiness has become very bubbly. It's a kind of a hip hop bubblegum kind of generation, and that has its own pluses and minuses. Now, the second aspect of the whole thing is, if myths are assassinated, what happens to the structure inside? Because the myths were generated over human history not because of any decree from the religious authority or that God spoke through the clouds with lightning and thunder. These myths were created because there was a need inside. So that continues as it was. So the way our hardware is structured, the myth inside continues. And the need for the myth inside continues. So what happens is, the need for the myth is satisfied in a dysfunctional way by films, by Hollywood, by TV studios, by governments, and by corporates. And this is a very dysfunctional mythology, a very superficial mythology, where the intent of the creator is to manipulate you and make profit. There's nothing natural or organic about these myths. And there is a fundamental difference of intent between the manufactured myths for a profit and the natural organic myths which were evolving over history. And therefore, these are very dysfunctional myths. So, the generation now tries to satisfy the hunger of the myth, hunger of the surreal, in a very dysfunctional way. You can see this hunger in children who want storybooks and who won't eat till the story is complete, or who would pressurize you to tell a story rather than give them food. Or a poor child in his, let us say, 10 to 12 years of age, who has only 20 rupees and decides to see a movie instead of eating. So the hunger is acute. It's not a normal hunger, it's an acute hunger. Hunger for the surreal, the hunger for the myth is an acute hunger. And unfortunately, now it's satisfied by a very uh, dysfunctional population, or others, let me say, a dysfunctional basket full of myths provided by very interested parties.
So, isn't it true that every age needs its own surreal? And the right surreal is itself an element in human and social evolution.
Very true. And unfortunately, very few societies have consciously thought over what kind of surreal and what kind of mythology we require in our age. There have been very few instances in human history where a society or the wise men of the society could deliberate over this issue and provide some sort of a design element, that there is a designed universe of myths or a designed universe of surreal as it operates in everyday life. Most of the times it has been an accidental fumbling through. And this is true even today, that we have not asked ourselves this question, that given our times, what kind of surreal and what kind of mythology is most optimum for our times. So we are fumbling through and we are paying a heavy price in terms of the quality of life and the quality of psychic development of the new generation. So it is true that every historical period has a spirit of the age, and congruent to that spirit, congruent to the needs of those times, there is a particular kind of surreal, a particular kind of mythology, a particular kind of culture which is optimum. And if we can put this question on a larger platform and people can collectively deliberate, we can come up with a partly designed surreal and a partly designed with a population of bits to help us in this process.
So, sir, is there a spiritual or philosophic theory which talks about evolution of surreal or evolution and surreal?
Philosophically, in the Western civilization, there has been a talk of spirit of the age, and there has been a talk of periods of history. So there is a Greek period, a Christian period, a dark age, a period of Renaissance, and the period of modernity, and a postmodern period. And appropriate to each of these periods is a basket full of surreal and a mythology which is informed by that surreal. Unfortunately, nobody has taken the concept of spirit of the age to designing of the myths. So mythology has remained by and large an academic issue. Design of culture has by and large remained an academic issue. And nobody has actually shown the audacity and the courage to really come forward and say, let me uh, start this process, if not lead this process. People are just too fearful that the societies are so complex and we understand so little. How can we take on such a responsibility on our shoulders? And that humility has done more harm than good. Instead of that, if there was somebody more narcissistic and constructive, he would have taken up that responsibility and done something on the basis of something better than nothing, and we would have been better off than we are now. So that is the philosophic area. I think uh, the philosophical solution now is to go for designing of a pluralistic society. And that involves a spiritual democracy, a cultural democracy, holistic healing, and a true democracy, not the sham democracy that we have. So this, if this is the kind of society we want to evolve, let us say we want to evolve multiple formats of society, a family format, a Osho commune format, a Sri Aurobindo format, and some other formats. Then proper to each format, we require a mythology and a cultural ecosystem. And in designing that, we have to skillfully use the surreal. In addition to our literary capabilities and artistic capabilities, and our psychological knowledge, of course. So this is the philosophical aspect of it. Spiritually speaking, in spirituality, some people have narrated the evolution of society at different times. And one such vision has been given by Sri Aurobindo, where he talks about uh, the tribal society, the classical family society that we see, the individualistic society, and the spiritual society. The society would
Mhm.
fall into this, and of course, the entire society would make the transition. It is the front of the society will which will make the transition to the next form. But for each form, we have to skillfully use the surreal and create a mythology and a cultural ecosystem. So that is the philosophical and spiritual aspect related to the surreal, its use. Apart from how the spirituality uses surreal for spiritual development, which is a separate topic by itself.
So how can psychoanalysis or holistic healing enter this discourse of surreal or the collective?
Psychoanalysis deals with the surreal day in and day out. Unfortunately, we have not used it in a constructive way. We have used it as a object of inquiry by Sherlock Holmes. So we have become Sherlock Holmes and we put it as a mystery before us to be resolved. We have never looked at it positively, without condemnation, without looking down upon it, to see it as a very precious entity to be developed and assimilated and leveraged and integrated. I think only Jung made positive use of mythology and fantasy and the archetypal nature. So, first part is that psychoanalysis has to see how positively we can use it. Maybe in construction of the goals, maybe in communicating the more difficult first in the archetypal terms or mythological terms. Maybe exploring if there actually is an archetypal layer of psyche or not. And how to create tools using this mythological area and the surreal and how to interpret them if it comes up naturally in therapy. So that is one aspect of it. And the second aspect of it is uh, holistic healing has always been using it in terms of idol therapy, in terms of uh, guided imagination, not guided, it's a word of CBT, but uh, guided imagination is a CBT word, but a much earlier word was visualization. So there is this whole set of meditative practices involving visualization. And then we have Reiki and pranic healing, which are used to magnify certain parts of the surreal or diminish certain parts of the surreal if they are recurring in nature. So we have a basket full of tools and basket full of intentions how to evaluate a particular element of surreal, at times even create certain elements of the surreal.
So how does the surreal fit into our times, and what would you suggest are the next steps for our civilization? I mean, for the
The poverty is of many types. People talk only about economic poverty, but there's something called intellectual poverty, artistic poverty, ethical poverty, and so on. I feel one of the elements also is of mythological poverty, and that is a global phenomenon today. The phenomena of mythological poverty and the way people uh, enter into relationships and the way people talk and think about each other today no longer involves much mythology which it used to. And I'm not talking about a long gone historical age. Even when I was small as a child, I could see in people's thinking and talking and actions so much of the surreal and mythology was involved. So much people used to think about festivals, say about Karwa Chauth or something. Today, whole of that part has gone out of the window. So, in the times that we live, there is a poverty of surreal and a poverty of myth, and that is because of the condemnation of it. And therefore, there is a need to manufacture customized surreal and mythology. That is one. The second important element is that we have said goodbye to the last historical period without adequately exploring it by art and involving surreal and art for three purposes: revisit and integration, celebration of the good that is lost, and mourning of all that is lost. So this function has not been done, and that is true not only for a transition from pre-modern to modern, but also as we make a transition from modern to post-modern, that also is not happening. So the poverty of surreal and the myth is accompanied by lack of artistic activity involving the surreal to address the change of the historical period.
Very true. The future, when we think and talk about all this, the future looks so meek. I don't know. I mean, what are we leaving for the generation behind?
True.
Well, today we, in our series of psychoanalysis and philosophy, we discuss surreal desire, society, and culture. And we, of course, welcome your suggestion, and you know where you have to mail us. It is huindia@gmail.com. And take care. And thank you, sir. Namaste.
Namaste.